After the huge success of Monster Hunter World on the PlayStation 4, it made sense for Capcom to bring the series back to Nintendo and create an adventure for the Switch that would build upon the many systems that were introduced in World. As with every Monster Hunter game, the premise remains almost entirely the same. After you get the basic plot, you are quickly thrown into the continuous cycle of slaying monsters to advance your rank, and to get parts to upgrade your weapons and armor. You can choose between 14 weapons that fall into 3 different categories. You've got light weapons, which are easy to control, heavy weapons that deal out the most damage, and finally ranged. Each of them have unique mechanics, which see you having to take into consideration several factors like positioning, speed, and timing to get the most out of them. As well as the generous amount of weapons, you have a ton of skills that you can unlock that can be attained by acquiring armor sets. These skills come in a huge variety that ranges from offensive to support, and they also have different levels from each other to increase their effectiveness on the enemy. And these systems all come together with the new inclusion of something known as the wire bug, a new feature that allows for hunters to be far more mobile. You can dash and glide through the air over short distances, dash into a jumping attack, or dash to a wall to start running up. Even when you are knocked over, you can quickly right yourself and counter-attack. The combat has never felt so snappy and fast-paced, and will no doubt satisfy long-time fans of the series, as well as those who may be jumping in for the first time. I've always been a huge fan of the Ys series that began way back in the late 80s. After the incredible 8th installment on the PlayStation Vita, a lot of people were skeptical if Monstrum Nox could live up to the high bar that it set, but thankfully it more than delivers. As with most entries, you take up the fight as Adol, and I've always enjoyed him as a character. Despite him being largely silent, he's always had bursts of personality. Ys 9 develops him further, more than any Ys game has done before, and his interactions with the various party members are often some of my favourite moments in the game. I won't spoil anything about the narrative, as it's one of the most engrossing aspects of the adventure, which is only equalled by the stellar gameplay, building off the party system that began in 7 before being refined in 8. This game takes it to a whole new level to create some of the best gameplay in the whole series. All of the battles play out in real time, with a ton of abilities and skills only a tap away. Each character can possess up to 4 of these at one time, with them leveling up the more that they are used in combat. Complementing this is the boost system that makes a return from Ys origin and revolves around a meter that's displayed on the screen. The more you damage an enemy, the meter slowly rises, and once filled you can unleash a boost to power yourself up. From there, your character is stronger in almost every way, while also being able to end the boost by using a special powered up attack. Taking advantage of this in your skills properly, whilst balancing different elemental types, makes up the backbone of combat, which can be a bit spammy at times, but in general it's super fast, often intense and quite addicting. Whether you're a long-time fan or are jumping into the series for the first time, Ys 9 would make a perfect jumping on point, as any prior knowledge of the series isn't exactly required to enjoy the journey. If you can find it on the cheap, it is well worth picking up. Originally released for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, Dragon's Dogma was one of those games that flew well under the radar and went on to become one of the most underrated games on those systems. Sure, it had its issues, but the underlying foundation was solid, and thankfully Capcom went and updated it for modern systems with a lot of the kinks ironed out. Set in a huge open world known as Gransys, the game presents a rewarding combat experience with 9 classes to choose from, all possessing a wide range of devastating skills and magic to tackle deadly foes with. Players embark on an epic adventure in a rich living world with 3 AI companions known as pawns. These partners fight independently, demonstrating the abilities that have developed based on the traits learned from the player. Since both you and your primary pawn earn experience and can be equipped with weapons and equipment independently, the idea is that you can lend and trade pawns with other players, which doesn't require an online subscription to take advantage of. Not only will pawns fight for you, but they'll also heal you when necessary, and even when you're just exploring, they'll search for ingredients and hidden objects, as well as memorize a location for anyone you might later pass them on to. It's a very strange concept that the game's story fails to make sense of, but in gameplay terms it definitely works. Of course, the pawns won't do everything for you though, and given the team's background with the Devil May Cry series, it's not surprising to find a very robust fighting system in place. You start off with little more than a light and heavy attack, but can learn additional moves if you pay a trainer, all of which work with a satisfying sense of weight and power. If you never got round to playing it when it first released, Dragon's Dogma is well worth picking up and adding to your collection. Although CrossCode was made by a small team, it's an RPG with so much to offer. There's a clear level of passion that went into the project, and over its 7 years of development, Radical Fish crammed it full of content, most notably the surprisingly deep story, incredible enemy designs and side quests that help pad out the experience. Now it all revolves around the fictional MMO known as Crossworlds and the mute protagonist Leah. In order to regain her memories, she's instructed to play the MMO, which may hold the secrets she desperately seeks. What starts off small soon opens up to a much grander tale that unfortunately falls a bit flat by the time the curtains close, but for what it lacks in narrative polish, it more than makes up for in gameplay. Despite the world of the in-game MMO having different character classes, you are a Spheromancer, which is mainly a ranged class, although you have melee options as well. As you fight monsters and level up, you'll be able to invest circuit points into your skill tree. These skill trees give you some customization options on how you want to grow your character, but as you get deeper into the game, you'll also unlock various elemental abilities that further expand your options. They actually let you change your path, which is an interesting mechanic that you don't often see within the genre. Visually, CrossCode is absolutely dripping with nostalgia and harkens back to the 16-bit days of old. There's a good variety of locations, and the environments are very well designed, each of them encouraging exploration, and the various towns and hubs you'll find have a ton of vendors to trade with. Despite its generic introduction, CrossCode is a game full of heart, and when you couple that with a great gameplay, stunning visuals and soundtrack, it's an easy recommendation. Like many, when it was first announced that The Witcher 3 would be coming to the Switch, I tempered my expectations and wondered how the hell they were gonna fit what is arguably one of the greatest action RPGs of all time onto a tiny cartridge. Not only did CD Projekt Red succeed in doing so, but they packed everything in that made the original so great as well. Of course, a few compromises were made in order for it to happen, and the first thing you'll notice is the visual downgrade. But having the option of taking this adventure on the go is something that just shouldn't be passed up. You once again take on the role of Geralt as you set out to rid the kingdom of the forces that would see it in ruin. You'll find yourself taking on a range of different quests that bring a huge variety of tasks to the table. But more importantly, no matter how trivial they may seem at first, they all have a certain weight to them and actual consequences within the world that makes each and every one of them worthwhile. What steals the show, however, is the combat itself. It affords the player many options when it comes to dispatching enemies, and with a healthy leveling up system in place, you're literally set free to build your character in a way that suits your style of play. This can all be attributed to the skill tree system that has several paths for the player to take. On top of this, you've also got armor, several pieces of equipment and weapons which can further augment your abilities in the world. Some of these can be bought, but the more powerful ones are sought out through exploration and collecting materials for it to then be forged and used by the player. This aspect really promotes searching every nook and cranny you may come across and adds a nice touch of replayability for those wanting to get their hands on everything the game has to offer. If you still haven't got round to experiencing this classic and only have access to a Nintendo Switch, The Witcher 3 would make for an excellent choice when looking for a new adventure to jump into. Legend of Mana was originally released for the PlayStation 1 way back in the late 90s. It astonished players with its incredible art style and engaging gameplay, with every square inch of the game absolutely oozing atmosphere thanks to the highly detailed sprites and beautifully drawn backgrounds that will no doubt draw the player into the world in the events that transpire. It all revolves around the Tree of Mana, a recurring aspect of the franchise which is now a shadow of its former self. Your goal is to take artifacts that you earn by exploring and use them to summon environments, from towns to coastal areas, forests and deserts, which then gives you new environments to explore and artifacts to earn. Watching the world of Legend of Mana slowly evolve is one of the main aspects that will keep you coming back. This also has the effect of regrowing the Tree of Mana and altering the mix of elements that make up the world. When you're not exploring or completing quests and talking to NPCs, the player can expect to find themselves jumping into their fair share of battles against an assortment of enemies. Encounters are plentiful, but but quick-paced, with the player controlling their character in real time as they dish out attacks and move around the battlefield. The core mechanics is simple, but it's fleshed out with a variety of weapons players have access to that strengthen them in different ways. Your weapon choice affects how you level up too, with different weapons focusing on different stats. Each weapon choice brings with it a set of different skills, so mixing up your arsenal can be vital to defeating some of Legend of Mana's more challenging bosses. Overall, Legend of Mana is a thoroughly enjoyable RPG that has managed to stand the test of time, but its lack of direction in the early game may have the potential to turn some players off. If you stick with it, however, its intricate world, intoxicating atmosphere, and meaningful story is something that you will not forget. If you've ever played a Tales game before, you'll know exactly what to expect when it comes to Vesperia. This entry stays true to the formula and offers up a compelling story with extremely fun gameplay that truly comes into its own during battle. It serves as the heart of the adventure, with each encounter being triggered by running into one of the on-screen enemies, eliminating the often torturous amount of random encounters that come with many RPGs. You control one of many playable characters that all have access to basic moves, as well as special abilities known as arts. These can be assigned to shortcuts, which comes in handy when stringing together both basic attacks and arts to deal out insane combos and heaps of damage. What neatly ties to this system are the various weapons you can find throughout the world, as they are one of the main ways to learn new skills. Of course, gaining experience for these skills does take a while, but once you've mastered it, it can be used even when that specific weapon is not equipped. As with most RPGs, your time will equally be spent between combat and exploration, with the world being populated by a nice variety of locales and several NPCs that bring these spaces to life. This quality carries over to the dungeons themselves, which offer up several puzzles to overcome, as well as much more challenging boss fights where all of the systems that make up the game come into play. From crafting items to cooking and skills, they each have a role to play to help prepare you for these moments. Overall, with its lovable cast of characters, incredible art style and visuals, with a combat system that feels like the icing on the cake, Tales of Vesperia is a journey worth taking. The World Ends With You was originally released for the Nintendo DS. Its setup took advantage of the unique handheld and went on to become a cult classic amongst those that its gameplay was truly appreciated. Neo is very much a sequel and doesn't rely on prior knowledge of the series for players looking to jump in, as it stars a new set of heroes, both Rindo and Tosai, who are thrown into a new edition of the Reaper's game, a competition for those who have recently passed on, to enter a reality known as the Underground, which is occupied by noise, negative emotions that take on the role of the enemy. The battle system is far more user-friendly than the original, and centers around three main things: combos, your groove score, as well as pins, which are assigned to a particular button. It's all about landing combos with these pins, and if you hit an enemy enough times with the same one, a drop the beat icon will appear, allowing you to strike the enemy with a different pin while the groove score slowly rises, letting players deal out special attacks once it reaches its limit. It's a really engaging system that soon becomes one of the most enjoyable aspects of the game. Of course, it's not all just simply about battling, as there are a few other factors that affect your character's performance, the main one being clothing that each character on your team has access to. There's about 5 different slots for each, and every piece provides several benefits such as extra HP, more attack damage or defense, as well as special qualities. These can be found within one of the several shops that make up the game's depiction of an extremely stylized version of Shibuya in Japan. Although some will find the combat rather repetitive, the rest of the experience really makes up for it, from all the character interactions and relationships to each and every collectible to be sought out in the game. There's plenty on offer here for both old fans and those of you who had never played it before. Up until this point, Pokemon had been following the same formula for years. Sure, there was a few spin-offs that offered a different take, but it wasn't until Legends Arceus that a true reimagining of the tried and tested tropes were fully revamped. The most notable change is the setting itself, with the game now taking place in the past, and along with it a completely different way to interact with the world of Pokemon. Jubilife's town serves as the central hub of the adventure. Here you can shop, change your clothes and talk with NPCs to take on new quests, exploring outside the village reveals a vast landscape bursting with Pokemon to test your skills and capture. The space is broken up into regions which slowly unlock the further you venture into the world. Thankfully, it's possible to acquire several mounts that make the process of navigating the environment all the more easier, as well as a fast travel option. But you won't want to be traveling that way, as simply exploring is at the heart of the gameplay. May it be collecting certain materials or trying to capture a specific Pokemon, it's all too easy to get swept up in the adventure and lose hours upon hours to the game as a result. As you acquire new Pokemon, you also take on tasks for each of them, such as defeating a certain amount of them to unlock research points. These contribute to your research level that unlocks more information on that certain Pokemon. It's a really neat system. Next come the battles, which can be started whenever you want to by simply throwing out your Pokemon and starting it, or sneaking up to take an advantage, which results in you getting in a good few moves before the enemy can counter. You can run around in battle as well and take turns unleashing one of several moves to land the killing blow, with all of the nuances of the system still in place, such as elemental damage and items to help even the odds. Overall, Arceus is the best Pokemon game you can currently get on the Switch. Sure, it's got its issues, but its fresh take on the series is something worth playing nonetheless. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 feels like a true culmination of the series, not only in narrative but also in gameplay, with everything that Monolith Soft have learned being on full display. The first most notable being the presentation that pushes the Switch to its limits. The grand, open environments present a vast world to be explored, which is absolutely teeming with life. You take on the role of Noah, as well as several other party members, and journey through this world, visiting towns, dungeons, and all the while developing your characters through leveling up. The best way to do this is to get stuck into battles, which present one of the most important aspects of the game, as well as the most challenging. They all revolve around the concept of chain attacks, that sees you being able to stop an enemy dead in their tracks, then select a wide range of different moves in a tactical fashion to rack up as much damage as possible. Unfortunately, Xenoblade 3 does have a tendency to completely litter the screen with an insane amount of information during each encounter, and with up to 7 party members at a time, it can become a bit hard to track who is doing what. Thankfully, there's a ton of weaponry and equipment that not only alters each party member's attributes, but also provides a means for them to stand out amongst the madness. If you're looking for the best action RPG on the Switch, there's no doubt in my mind that despite some of its flaws, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is it. The larger-than-life setting and space opera conflict provides an unforgettable adventure that will no doubt put a smile on your face once the credits have rolled. Well, that does it for today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos which release every Monday and Thursday. You can follow me on all of the socials which are linked below to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters: Rhino, Skill Jim, Shuden, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Paul, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jackadoo, GameCube Galaxy, and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links in the description as well. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.